AI promised us it was going to solve this productivity crisis. We were going to have more time because we were going to be so efficient. So, why is it increasing burnout? Why are we feeling so frazzled, so overloaded, and so overwhelmed? I'm Suzanne Rath, and you're listening to Endures for your daily dose of endurance leadership and life lessons. So, in today's podcast episode, I want to talk about this awesome article, and I'm going to share the link in the show notes for Medium. And it's called The Productivity Paradox: Why AI is Making Us More Burnt Out, Not Less. Now, it is beautifully written. So, I'm going to share some of the core points with you and then relate them back to some of the things I see from an endurance leadership point of view. So, they start by talking about, or he starts by talking about, when we have these days where we've had all this output from AI, that we don't have this satisfying tiredness of having a productive day. And I can really relate to this because I know that when I have a lot of little tiny things to do, it does not energize me. Like, I could get through 50 things on the tiny things to do list. But if I don't knock off some of my big rocks, there's some of the things that are really meaningful to me, and be able to look back at the day and go, okay, well, I had that training session, or, I made some progress on our website, or I made some progress on my presentation, like whatever my core goals are at that point, I just finished the day feeling frazzled and not fulfilled. And so the writer is talking about how we can finish these days and weeks and months if we've produced all this output with the hollow, low grade burnout of someone who's been sprinting on a treadmill, moving fast, generating a lot, but never quite sure if any of it matters. Boom. Like, the whole thing of having a vision, but connecting our vision to our purpose, our values, what is meaningful to us. It does not matter what that vision is. But if we're producing all this output on something that is meaningless, then what's the point? Like, we are meaning making machines. I can't remember who said that, but it is a phrase that I love. So he goes on to say there's this flaw in the 10x productivity narrative. So he's like, treated human work as if it was a factory process, inputs inputs in, outputs out, where the bottleneck was execution speed. But for writers, for example, if you're engaged in knowledge work, the thinking time is often where the magic happens. Like the drafting the sentence, the having the block, the going away to recover. And this is the case in so many industries, by the way, having those recovery breaks, having the change of pace. That's where you come up with the gold. Otherwise, it's like putting something into an AI tool and getting this dumbed back thing, like when you get it to draft your emails and you haven't taught it how you are, and it just dumbs down your email. It loses the essence of what makes you you. And something doesn't sit quite right with you around maybe the email or the thing that you've created, but you just can't work out what it is, as opposed to creating a smaller piece of good quality work, whether it's craftsmanship, whether it is writing, whether it is clinically reasoning your own way through something as a clinician. Like, there's so many things that there's a satisfaction to actually doing them. And so he talks about how, like, AI doesn't always reduce cognitive labor. In many cases, it replicates and reproduces it and multiplies it. So instead of writing one draft slowly, you're reviewing 5 quickly. Instead of researching something yourself, you're back and forthing with ChatGPT or whatever, because it's telling you confidently these things because it is a sycophant. They have those tendencies built into them. And you go, okay, that research fact sounds great. That suits my narrative. But you still have to go and research it yourself. There's no joy to it. It's quick and it's easy, but it's like eating McDonald's to fill you up. Like, you just don't feel good after it. So he talks about how work is actually demanding just as much, and maybe sometimes more. Then he talks about decision fatigue at scale. And if you listen to the podcast, I talk a lot about the decision fatigue and trying to eliminate the small little decisions that you make as a leader. But he talks about how we're prompting a judgment call with every little thing. So if we're putting everything into AI to check it, how much are we underestimating our own intelligence or our abilities to do things, right? Like we think we're offloading the decisions, but then we're still going, well, I don't know, is it right? Maybe I should have kept it this way. So he says that heavy AI users aren't actually making fewer decisions, they're making orders of magnitude more of them in less time. And because they didn't generate the content themselves, they don't trust it. And I have been there as well, right? Like you think you're quicker, but by the time you back and forth, you've gone down some other rabbit hole of something you didn't even need in the first place. And you're creating all this stuff for no reason. And thinking about those tasks that actually need your voice, your originality, your skill set, your genius. He also talks about the guilt loop, and this is rarely discussed with AI. And so he talks about how if AI takes us longer than what we think it's going to, because we think it's going to pump stuff out all the time or really quickly, or somebody else set it up. My thing this week is how I'm going to use it to organize certain systems and SOPs in my clinical business. And someone else made it sound so easy. You just connect all of these things. And half an hour of research into, downloading this thing and Claude coding this and doing whatever. And honestly, I was bored because that's not my skill set. And I'm going to come back to that at another point. But there's a little part of my head and my inner voice going, oh, everybody says this is really easy. I mean, it's almost quicker to do the thing that I needed to do in the first place. So we have this kind of like guilt or imposter syndrome. Now he talks about measuring it off against another human being. But I wonder how many of us go to workshops or go to online things and sit there, and when people nod and they say, oh yeah, I knew that, or I've got this set up, you're going, I didn't even know that was a thing. And the thing is, it might not even be relevant to you. I was in a great workshop the other day by Claude. And when they mentioned things that at some point in my business might be useful, but they're not a priority for me right now, they're not part of my setup, I just go, okay, I'm going to park that over there. So I'm refusing to let that standard, like me to measure myself against people who are at different stages of their business, who have different goals for their business, who are not running two businesses, who, all have different values, so many things, because I am fussy about what I use AI for and what I don't. He also talks about the always on optimization. And I think this is such a thing now, right? Like we glorify being busy. And you'll have heard me speaking before about the optimized routine, right? Where you fill every ounce of your day with, oh, well, you can just listen to that podcast on the way to work, or you can just do this. You know what? Maybe my brain actually needs to drive to work and listen to nothing, or I just need to listen to some Taylor Swift. We need to not be constantly trying to cram stuff into our brains with every given second, loading it with things. We actually need the space to not. We need the silence to sit with and think about things, or maybe not think about anything and see what comes up. So, and then of course he talks about the skill erosion anxiety. So are you getting worse at your job even though you're creating more output? And I think this is something we all need to consider. What are the aspects of our role that have to be done by humans? What are the aspects of us that make us us? Why would we outsource those things and lose those things that are uniquely us? And so when I look at what I will use AI for, if it is automating a repetitive task that is meaningless to me, 100%. If it is sorting through content and organizing it in a way, brilliant. If it's anything to do with financial stuff, brilliant. But I'll probably find myself checking it. There's so many things that has these really valuable and great uses for, but then others that I'm just not really willing to use it. It doesn't matter how many meetings I sit in and how many times people can tell me I can produce 100 pieces of content from this one podcast episode and send them out to everyone everywhere. I just don't want to. And that's me. And I think we need to be, aware of that. And then he talks about the neuroscience of what's happening in your brain with AI. So I told you this was a great article. Autonomy, we're wired to need a sense of agency. So when you're putting things through an AI, you start to go, even if you built up its memory, is that me, or is that being fed to me by someone else, or is that actually my original idea, or I'm not really sure. Mastery. So if AI tools are shortcutting outcomes, but we're not actually building the how to on the thing, like we're not getting that thing of mastering something, that reward. Meaning, we need to believe our work matters. Obviously, meaning is something that I really talk about. And then he comes up with some skills to, use AI better or differently, which I love. I will let you read the article. I do love this phrase though: burnout thrives in silence. So, naming the emotional cost, if AI assisted work is making you feel hollow, anxious, or less proud of what you produce, that's legitimate information. Back to the so there's a lot in that article. And like I said, I will share the link in the show notes because it is so worthwhile. My question is, as part of my work, I feel like we were on this slippery slope anyway before AI, and it's actually accelerated this slippery slope. So we already had a problem with the rhythm of our work days, with clarity on vision, with recovery, with the support systems we surrounded ourselves with. We came out of this period of COVID and all these other things that have happened in the world that have heightened our nervous systems, depending on the part of the world you live in. There are people with forms of PTSD. Like, I have friends who live in Melbourne and in Victoria who are clinic owners and had various businesses whose experience of the COVID times, for example, was vastly different to mine. You might have lived through a war. You might be currently living through a war. My brother lives in Dubai. They have seen missiles landing. That is something I can't even fathom, right? It's not something that I've ever seen in my life. But if we have capacity issues, boundary issues, clarity issues, all of these things, whatever we add into a poor environment to thrive, it's just going to accelerate it. It's the concept of entropy, where things will naturally come to the most disorganized state. And so, output and endurance, we have to realize this: output and endurance are not the same. We can't use AI to increase our pace without actually increasing our human skills to thrive. And so the question I leave you with at the end of that summary of that article, pretty much, if our productivity did become infinite, what would actually make our lives meaningful? Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you tomorrow for more from Endurance.